Hello everybody, I'm Meji Bilik, the founder of Self-Publishing Mastery, a published author of fiction and non-fiction books, and an author coach. And I welcome you to a new episode of the Self-Publishing Mastery Talks. Our special guest today is one of the top editors in Southern California and also the editorial director of CamCat books, Helga Schier. She's going to be here with us in a few minutes, but for now, I just want to take the time to make a few announcements, so bear with me. I'm really excited to tell you that Self-Publishing Mastery Talks is transitioning to a new format. We are preparing more goodies for you in the near future. And those goodies include trends, news, advice, and book recommendations. And actually, I'm going to start that today. Self-Publishing Mastery website is undergoing some changes. We want to help you more. We want to serve you better. And to do that, we need your help. So we need your help to help you and the writing community. And we're creating a survey. The link is in the description of the video. So please take the survey. And you get the chance to win a $10 Amazon gift card. Please take the time to subscribe to our newsletter, because in doing so, not only you become a member of an amazing community of passionate writers who are making the world a better place one book at a time, but you also get a list of the top Amazon book reviewers and the book launch checklist that shows you everything you need to consider when you're preparing your book launch. I'm also excited to invite you to a webinar I will be doing on September 2nd for the Author Learning Center. It is a webinar on a topic I'm really passionate about, and it's called How to Build a Power Author Brand. And I'm really passionate about author branding because I think it is the foundation of your book marketing strategy. It is the foundation of your book marketing activities. And it is also what makes you easily recognizable and lovable. It can help you build a strong relationship with your readers. And if you have a hard time figuring out what I'm talking about, what an author brand is, think about personality, think about persona, but this time is the public personality. And this personality is much more than a nice logo. It is actually something that's built on deeper aspects of who you are. It is built on your authenticity. And I invite you to read a great article that's been published on the blog of the Alliance of Independent Authors. I have a contribution in that blog post on authenticity. It is also built on your mission, on your vision, on what you want your legacy to be. And to learn more about it, please join me, as I said, on September 2nd. If you're not a member of the Author Learning Center, that's fine. You can register and attend for free. And if you are considering building your author brand, I'm here for you. You can book a coaching session with me, or you can join one of my coaching programs. And because our topic is editing, I picked two books that can help you self-edit your books and become a better writer, because you will learn in this interview I did with Helga that it is recommended to do as much self-editing as you can before you turn your manuscript to an editor, because editor work at an hourly rate. So the more hours they need to put into your manuscript, the more you have to pay. So one book I really love is this one. It's called Self-Editing for Fiction Writers, How to Edit Yourself into Print. It's an older book, but it's still really, it's timely. And two professional editors share in this book their expertise and proven techniques for turning manuscripts into published works of fiction. And you've got everything in this book, from interior monologue to dialogue to showing versus telling. And the nice thing about this book also is that every chapter ends with an exercise. And the second book, I have this on my Kindle. I do read a lot on Kindle. It is The Anatomy of Prose by Sacha. Sacha is a a guest of our self-publishing mastery talks. Following our conversation, I decided to purchase this book, and I can tell you I love it. These two books are my recommendations for you if you want to improve your writing skills. It's time for us to dive into our conversation with Helga Schier and learn about editing, about working with an editor, and about what you can do to become a better writer. Enjoy. We are here now with our special guest today on Self-Publishing Mastery Talk. She is one of the top editors in California, and she's also an editorial manager with CamCat Books, a publishing company on the rise. So without much further ado, hello, Helga Schier. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Andrea, hi, and thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure to chat with you about books.
About books, yeah.
Books, yes.
Finally, yeah. We were talking about having this conversation for a while, and now it finally happens.
Mm-hmm.
Because let's face it, in the competitive market today, authors can really succeed without having on their team a really good editor. So this is obviously our topic, our main topic today, editing your book, working with an editor, and everything that goes around. And we are going to talk about traditional publishing as well, because, well, Helga, she, as I said, she's the editorial director of CamCat Books, but she's also a really coveted and appreciated editor who takes up her own clients. And I can tell you, she has a long waiting list. So if you want to work with her, you need to make sure you book her in advance. Do you have any open spots for this year, Helga, or not anymore?
No, I do. I mean, I'm really happy that I have such a long waiting list. Of course, in part, this is true because I work for a publisher, but it's also because I have a lot of clients here in Southern California, and I'm very, very fortunate, for that to be the case. But yes, I am booking people now for the end of October and November of this year. So feel free to check up with me and see if I have time, if I am the right fit. But you're so right. Working with an editor really can make or break your book. And I know that many writers are a little hesitant to work with somebody else because they might feel that an editor will mess with the writer's voice or will want to make the writer's story his or her own. But that's really not the case. A good editor will not try to change your story, but he or she will try to really enhance your story. And, as I like to say it, make it sing. Your editor is your first, well, probably not your first, but among your first readers. Mm-hmm. And since we are such experienced readers, we will know how to help you really bring your vision onto the paper, the vision that you actually had, so that the reader really can take it away. So don't look at us as somebody messing with your book, mm-hmm. but look at us as your real ally. So that's my understanding of how the profession ought to work, and I think it does work that way most of the time.
Yeah, and I second you and in everything you just said, Helga. And I think we talked about working together, and I know how you explain that it's not just the editor looking at your manuscript and polishing it. It's just the editor is, in a way, some sort of a teacher for you, because you're going to learn so much from someone like Helga in the process, because a good editor will always explain what they are doing and why they are doing it. And it's a great learning curve that will make your next book way better, will improve your writing style.
I agree, and that actually is part of, there are so many aspects to working with a writer, respectively for a writer to work with an editor, and really the most rewarding aspect of editing for me is to see what a writer does with the comments that I make. I should probably say in the beginning that I'm primarily a development editor, so I don't really look for commas and periods, and I can define that really briefly in a moment. But yeah. What I look for really are the big picture issues, so like story development, character development, world building, all those kinds of things that make a story come to life.
Mm-hmm.
And it really is so important, you know, to have that set up right and done right before you pass it on to an agent or an editor at a publishing house. And it really is so rewarding to see writers grow, understanding how storytelling really works, because there is a mechanism to it which in a way you can learn, but not really theoretically. You learn by doing. You learn. You find you work your way through a story, and you realize all the aspects that you can still deal with. And if you're working with somebody who comes from the outside, that'll just enhance the project as well as the process immeasurably. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think we also learn by reading good literature. I think that's how I learned back in Romania when I was born. I was an avid reader since I can remember. And I want to talk about your story, Helga, because we are both of us are transfluent. So I want to talk about that because it is amazing how someone who was born on a different continent like Europe ends up mastering English in such a way that they become an editor and they end up helping native speakers to publish. Yeah. So that's such an inspiring story, and I want to talk about that. But because you brought up the type of the type of editing you're doing, for those who are not familiar, I just want to like really quickly talk about the different types of editing, from like the basic one up to the complex one, because I think what you're doing is really complex.
Yes, development editing is probably the most complex form of editing, but it should actually be the first step. Because development editing is really where you are making sure that your story is on paper. So you make sure that your pacing works, that your world is defined and described well enough for the reader to actually live in it. And it makes sure that the characters are developed well, so that they have a motivation from start to finish, that they go through changes, that their relationships are interesting. You need to make, as a development editor in that stage, you need to make sure that there is enough urgency in the character's motivation to go through the novel, to take all the steps that it takes to get from the beginning of your story to the end. So it's really the big picture issues that you're looking at. It's story editing, if you will, story and structural and conceptual editing. The next step is what is generally called either line editing or substantive editing, and that is when you really go down to the sentence level. But you're still not looking for commas and periods. What you're doing now is you're going into the individual scenes, making sure that they are as tight as possible, that there's no superfluous word, that every word is the best at expressing what you're trying to express. So that's very much where you're looking at voice and at language flow, which is a level still above the last step, which is copy editing, which basically looks for mistakes. So there you're looking for for typos, for spelling mistakes, for commas and periods, and of course also for things like repetitiveness, or missing words, or inconsistencies that might be left over from other editing processes. So those are the three major steps. They're not that clearly delineated, of course, because every editor is aware of the other steps, and most editors are mostly concerned with making the manuscript before them the best it can be. So if in the development process I see a glaring error in a grammatical sentence, obviously I'll point it out. But this is not going to be the focus of a development edit. So the focus shifts, but they're not necessarily delineated. And if you are trying to publish with a traditional publisher, the most important thing for you to get right is the conceptual edit, the development edit, because it is so much easier to fix language or to fix commas and periods. So a publishing house is far more inclined to accept a manuscript where the story is fantastic. But, the commas and periods are not quite in the right place. That's an easy fix, and a publishing house won't care so much. But if you have every comma and period in place, but the story is boring or the characters don't jump off the page, the publisher won't take it. So it's most important to make sure your story is in place.
Yeah, so you anticipated my question about still hiring an editor if you want to traditionally publish your book, but I want to just mention glaring error. I love that. So you can tell Helga she's an editor. I don't hear like a lot of people saying glaring error. So I have that. I will, if I may quote you in one of my books, then I will, or if I can use it, I will put it there. I love it. So yeah, I know that now, I mean, and you know as well, Helga, a lot of authors nowadays, they are kind of going for the self-publishing route, but still, I think deep down, everybody is still hoping to get a traditional publisher.
I understand that, actually. I think there are really good reasons for both ways, for both ways to get published. I understand that the traditional idea of finding a publisher, makes a lot of people, it's good for your ego, if you will, because yes, traditional publishers, they go through a selection process. So not every book that is submitted to us at CamCat Books, for example, is accepted. We have an acquisitions team. It consists of 3 people. Actually, four if you look at the initial reader. So that consists of 4 people, and all 4 of us read at least portions of the book, not the entire book, but at least portions of the book, and we all have to be sort of on board with buying the book. That means that you have that. If you are traditionally published, you know that somebody has looked at it, a professional has looked at it, and has deemed you worthy of being published. It's that gatekeeping aspect that is very annoying about publishing for many authors, but it's also that very gatekeeping aspect that makes people feel like, look at this. I have achieved the status of being published by a publisher, and I understand that this has value, but don't forget that even editors and publishing houses don't know what's good and what's right and what's perfect. We go by our instincts and by what we like. So if you are turned down by a publisher, that does not mean, that your book isn't worthy. It doesn't mean that. It just means it's not right for this particular publisher at this particular time. And I really, really, really want to stress that, because it's true. It's really true. There are books that are not ready. And we at CamCat, actually, if we find a book like that where we're like, oh my God, no, this needs so much work, we can't take it because of it, we turn around and tell the author, listen, you just sent this to us too early. Go back, do this, 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 and this, and then we'll look at it again. So there are definitely those books that are not ready and that therefore won't be accepted anywhere. But if your book is really ready, if it has gone through editorial processes and is well thought out and matured inside of you, and you're turned down by one publisher, it doesn't mean it's not worthy. And that's where I think, self-publishing really does come in, because there are so many books out there that should be published, and there's just not, either the right publisher hasn't been contacted, or for whatever reasons, in order to be published by a traditional publisher, a lot of things really have to happen, and it may not always happen. So self-publishing, I think, is really a very viable way to go if you as an author are either able to put in all the work that it will take if you do it, if you can wear all those hats that are necessary, publicity, marketing, copy editing, book cover design, all those things go into making a book. If you can do it, great. Or if you have the wherewithal to hire all these people and supervise all these people, I think then self-publishing really, really, really is a very viable way to go. And there's, of course, oodles of companies out there who by now will do this for you.
Yeah.
But it is really, you need all those things in addition to the book to make it successful, because just slapping a cover on it and putting it on Amazon won't get you anywhere. And this is really what people need to remember, that it takes so much, to make a book successful. Good book is the beginning, but it's not the end of that journey. So,
Yeah, for sure. And that's why book marketing is one of the, I think one of the topics that authors have a hard time with, and they try to figure it out. And, but those who do, they do really well. I mean, there are success stories. There are authors who are cranking out books and who are really happy with, and they are full-time authors. They quit their jobs, so everything is working for them.
There's really a lot of them out there, and really power to them, and many of my private clients, as with pen and paper, so not for CamCat, but as with pen and paper, are actually going the self-publishing route, and many of them are just very are entrepreneur. They have an entrepreneur spirit. Yeah. And I think this is what you need. You need to be able to divorce yourself from the book that you've written and go out there and sell it. And that's not an easy thing to do. It really isn't, because, you love your book. I often liken it to children. I have kids, and I know how hard it is to separate yourself from those kids and or from your books, and to try and market those out there. It's hard. And, that's in part, why it's good to hire publicists, why it's good to hire a marketing company, because then you don't have to yourself peddle your book, or why it's also great to have a publisher, behind you who can help you with all that too. So.
We kept mentioning CamCat books, but you've been associated with the traditional publishing landscape for many, many years. We are going to talk about that because I want to tell your story. But I have a question. Another thing about a publisher, I know a friend of mine who's with the same literary agent, Stephen Hudson I am. She just got a deal with you, and so she got the deal in July, but the book is going to be out next year in 2021. So a publisher has these editorial calendars, and there are only so many books you're going to put out throughout a year, throughout 12 months. But I want to ask you, did you ever get, throughout your career, did you get a manuscript that you find to be so timely and so great that you said, oh no, this manuscript doesn't have to wait a year, it has to go now?
Yeah, that does happen. But it's very, very tricky, and not only because of the editorial process, but actually mostly because of the marketing process.
Yeah.
Marketing needs about 6 months to turn the wheels and get it going, to get it out to reviewers, and to position it in the bookstores, and it takes about 6 months. So the book has to be ready editorially 6 months before the pub date. So if I know we bought this book just very recently, and it is really in very good shape, and I think we literally bought it in July, and let me actually look at the plan, and the idea is to publish it in May.
Okay.
So it is less. That's the plan. It may shift for a month. That depends. So it is less than a year in this case, because we know that we can have a relatively short editorial plan because the book is in good shape. But we still need those 6 months of marketing. So that's just not our marketing department. No marketing department is less than 6 months. But yes, to go back to the question, absolutely. Actually, I mean, this is there's one situation long time ago back at Random House where it was during the O.J. Simpson trial. I don't know if any of you, who are listening remember this, but the O.J. Simpson trial, was going on during I think from spring to March out here in the Los Angeles area. And by that time, I was still at Random House with Crown Publishers. And we had I don't exactly, I have to admit that I don't know the genesis of this book. I don't know if the idea was generated by Crown or if somebody from outside Crown came and sold the book to us. But what it was a book of O.J. Simpson when he was sitting, at the defense table was making notes all the time, scribbling and drawing things. And so somebody came up with the idea of publishing an O.J. Simpson scribble book, and we did. Obviously, that had to be out while the trial was still going on. So that thing was developed and edited within 6 weeks.
Wow.
Was pushed through to production within 4 weeks and was out for about 3 months during the trial. So, but that was a very easy book to publish that fast, and also to market that fast. Because all you needed to do, there was publicity about O.J. Simpson around us everywhere. O.J. Simpson sold that book for us, and but that's absolutely, if there is a dire need to get the book out quickly, you bet it's possible.
Okay.
But certainly in a house like Crown, I mean, that's which is part of Random House, that those are powerhouses. They can do whatever they want. Smaller publishers, it might be a little more difficult because smaller publishers have less money, less staff.
Yeah.
So it is less guaranteed that you can get a fast turnaround. But is it possible? You bet. If need be, of course.
I know, I mean, also every author kind of hopes to get picked by one of the top publishers, but I'm sure there are, and we kind of figure out the advantages, like you said, if there is needed, this fast turnaround is possible. And then if you get lucky, they put all the marketing money into your book and you see your book everywhere. But I'm sure there are perks, and there are reasons to, rather than go and chase these big guys, to work with a small publisher. Yes, actually, I would say big publishers, particularly now and I don't necessarily mean the COVID-19 pandemic, but what I mean is the changing landscape with self-publishing and smaller and niche publishers and independent publishers sprouting up. Big publishers, because they have such a huge operation behind them, have to buy big books. And by that I mean books by tried and true authors, or books that can potentially make a splash, such as Michelle Obama's or Melanie Trump's book, or whoever, books that will really get a huge sale. Yeah. And you can kind of spot these books. So a debut author, or an author with a small intimate book, will have a harder time landing a deal with a large publisher. And that's particularly true for debut authors. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Because it's the big fish, small pond, big fish situation. It really is, because a big publisher, they have so many authors, obviously, to stay afloat, that if a book doesn't perform the way they want it to perform, they can afford to kind of let it fall through the cracks, and focus on a book that does perform the way they do. A small publisher cannot afford that. We have to be and want to be, and really for fiscal reasons have to be behind every single book that we publish. We can't afford our books not to sell, because we depend on every single one. Yeah. This basically means you get quality editorial
attention, and you get a team that's fully behind you. Because again, in a small publisher, you have fewer people. At CamCat, we know each other really well. We work cross departments all the time. If somebody has an idea for editorial, I'm happy to hear it. If I have an idea for marketing, I'm happy to sprout it out. And we have everybody. We have weekly meetings where everybody talks, and literally every single person on the team talks about the books that are on our docket. And so you really get a lot of attention, and you're not likely to fall through the cracks simply because a small publisher can't afford that. So that's the advantage. The disadvantage, of course, is that we don't have the same kinds of connections to publicists, to magazines, to newspapers. And that's not only CamCat. That's true for all smaller publishers. We don't have the same kind of clout. We don't have the clout with bookstores. We don't have the clout with other distributors. We certainly don't have the clout with Amazon. To push our books through whatever algorithm Amazon uses to the top of the bestseller list. It's hard work for a smaller publisher to do that. So there really are pros and cons to both. And I would never, discount or discard a smaller publisher over a big publisher, nor vice versa. And you can travel. You can have one book published there and another book published there. It's rare that you can move one book to another publisher. That's rarer. But you can certainly have books published with multiple publishers. That's really not unheard of. With a series, I wouldn't recommend it because you're kind of losing the sell-through. But it is certainly possible, with standalone books.
And you can choose to publish your book with a publisher and then self-publish your other book. My fiction book is a small publisher in the UK made me the honor and great joy to publish my short story collection. I was over the moon with joy. I was living in Romania back then, and I thought that was such a big accomplishment for some girl from Romania just to go to the London Book Fair and get that book, a contract just like that. But then with my nonfiction books, I chose the self-publishing route. And Helga, she's so right, because you need to market those books, otherwise Amazon will bury that. And I think it's because I'm working with authors, and they think, oh, okay, now I have my book ready, I want to launch it. So that's 6 month time to market the book. That's the same with the self-published book. It doesn't matter if that book is traditionally or self-published. You still need that time to promote that book and grow your audience and be ready to launch it in a good way.
Right. I mean, all these things that go into that, what you mentioned before we came on this talk, like the website and your social media presence and reviews that you need to get before, so you got something to write on the back of your book and of your cover. It's there is so much that goes into it, and of course, it's a daunting task for many authors. But for those who are curious and want to have control over it all, it's fun. Because it certainly is also true that even if you have a publisher, a traditional publisher, you have to work with them. And you have your publisher is not going to do your website nor your social media. That's not going to happen. You can hire publicists to do this for you, but your publisher won't. There's no money for that. So and oftentimes, your publisher may not even be able to do all that much more than the general, trying to get reviews for you, getting you into distribution is this actually is what I think is probably the biggest difference between self-publishing and traditional publishing, the distribution. Because as a publisher, the moment you have a few books, on your docket, you can get good distribution deals that spread your books in bookstores, in libraries, schools, etc. And as a self-published author, if you only have one book, it's hard. That's really, really hard to find somebody to distribute for you, because even, you know, organizations like Ingram can't really offer you an interesting deal with just one book. So that's the biggest difference, I would say. So as a self-published author, you for a little while, all you may have is Amazon, you know, and all the other Kobo and whatnot is out there for online publication. So
since you mentioned social media and websites, I remember when I signed the contract with my publisher in the Isle of Man, he said, "Oh, are you familiar with Good?" And I said, "Okay, what can I do to help?" And they said, "Oh, we are hiring a publicist in Los Angeles." That never happened, by the way, but I ended up here, so I guess they could see in the future somehow. But they said, "You should go and join Goodreads and create a Goodreads profile." I had no idea what Goodreads was. That was in 2012, so that's how I started looking into what it takes to market your book as an author. I want to go back to talking about editorial, about editing, editors, your editorial services, because that's the main focus of our conversation today. So what draws you, Helga? Because I know you get a ton of submission, and yet you cannot, even if you wanted, you cannot take all those books. So what draws you to a manuscript? I would say as an independent editor, and then if you want to talk from the perspective of the editorial manager of a publisher, that it would be interesting to hear that perspective as well.
Yeah, as an independent editor, just like any other person on this planet, I have particular preferences, but my preferences aren't so much whether I like a particular genre. What I look for in a book, and this is for me as an independent editor, but also as the editorial director of CamCat, is books that are showing me, or that allow me to walk in other people's shoes. So I do nonfiction, but my passion is fiction. I'll say that, you know, out loud. And memoir to me is sort of like fiction. But this is really what I look for. I don't necessarily look for beautiful language, because that can be helped. I don't necessarily look for a tight manuscript, because again, that can be helped. What I look for is a writer or an author who has written about something and has told a story, or is trying, and let's actually say, who is trying to tell a story that makes me look at something in a way that I never have. And this is not necessarily a big thing. Honestly, it isn't. It can be something very, very small. It's just, if it's you know, a character that jumps off the page might do it for me. A sentence that makes me shiver might do it for me. Or a story that grips me, maybe not from the start, but at some point really grips me. You know, can totally do it. I am looking for things that allow me to step outside my world, my comfort zone, and make me see other things. And I have to say, I've been doing this for almost 30 years. There was not a single manuscript that came across my desk that didn't have at least one such morsel in it. I won't say that all manuscripts were salvageable. I can't say that. Some of the manuscripts never became accomplished enough to be published. But every single one of the books that I have read as a professional editor gave me something to think about, or to smile about, to cry about, to get pissed off about, whatever. That is really, you know, that's what keeps me with this job. So, but that, all of that said, so this is what attracts me to a book, something that gets me interested in it. And as I said, it really can be very different things. And then what keeps me with a book is the ability to see that the writer that the writer has some sort of insight into the world, into characters, into what makes his people, if you will, tick. And I mean, a lot of people say that, okay, that Helga, what you're saying is the manuscript has to have something to say.
Yeah.
And I think that's really what it is.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean it has to be highbrow. You know, I actually, as a person, I love mysteries. Mysteries are my passion. And all of those mysteries, they're fast-paced stories, and this is how they take you through. But the good ones, they show you more. They show you why people, they show you basically why good people take a wrong turn. They show you whether or not a bad person can take the right turn. They show you all those things that might converge to turn into chaos. So it's for me, books that understand that people make choices all the time, and those choices can be wrong, and they affect other people. Those are the books that get me. I want to walk in other people's shoes. And this is also very, very similar actually to what I look for at our publishing house. However, at our publishing house, I have certain parameters that I have to follow, because and the parameters are in part set by me, of course, or by the rest of our house. But we are CamCat Books. We publish certain kinds of books. So and that means nothing other than this is what our publisher has chosen
to publish. Yeah.
Yes, and so we need to look at that big framework. I'm looking for books that allow me to walk in other people's shoes, but I have to define this a little bit better. So, you know, for example, we don't look for children's books. We don't publish children's books. We wouldn't know how to market them. So we don't do that. We don't really look for historical fiction either. So that, even though I personally love that, this is not really what we're looking for. And we absolutely don't look for literary fiction, again, because we wouldn't know how to market this. We have defined ourselves as a publisher of genre fiction, and so this is what I need to do. And but the approach is still the same. It is a book that makes me listen up and look. But you know how. And this may sound super vague, but I can't give you a rule as to what does that. What makes me look and listen. It really can be as simple as a phrase, can be as simple as a plot twist. It doesn't matter, whatever it is. And I think that, you know, that people who sit down and want to write, they also do need to be aware that you have to write about something that is special. And that you have to have something to say, or why else would anyone want to read it? You have to have a topic, a theme, a character that is compelling to more people than just you.
Correct.
Because more people want to, because if not more people read it, you're doomed. So it really, you have to grab people's interest, but there's oodles of ways to do that. And that is why there's oodles of publishers who might be interested in you. So it's hope needs to spring eternal in this business, and you have to wade through tons of rejections before you get accepted. But you know, if it's a good book, it will find a publisher. So.
Yeah, well, J.K. Rowling, she did that, and look where she got. So look what she got, where she's now. So
King, all of them,
all of them. Yeah,
had trouble finding their getting their big break. There's a lot of people who say that there is no such thing as overnight sensations. There just isn't anything like that. There's hard work that goes into it long before.
Yeah, even if a book appears to be an overnight sensation, if we think about The Martian or Paula Hawkins' Girl on the Train, I'm sure there was a lot of work going into those manuscripts before they reached the final. The version that got them to stardom, to that success.
Right, and oftentimes it's not their first book, you know, so it's their third or fourth.
Yeah.
Paula Hawkins is actually her third,
Speaking of the work that goes behind a book, a bestseller, when is a good time for an author to send their manuscript to you for the development editing? Because so is it the first draft, or they need to go back at it and tweak it? When is a good time to start working?
It's never too late. It's never too early. The only guideline I can give you is if you, but editing is if you're working with a professional, is expensive. So it behooves you, to do as much as you can by yourself, or with price-worthy deals. So if you by yourself, by editing yourself, and by garnering, the assistance of beta readers, trusted friends who give you tips. Once you've exhausted all this and revised your manuscript, and you think you can't get it any better without a professional's input, that's when you should send it. Whether this is the 1st or 10th draft, I can't tell you. I would advise you, or I would advise every author to to work on at least a second draft, or write that first draft to get it out. Let it sit for a while, read other books, talk to people, then reread your manuscript with a fresh mind and edit it, self-edit it. I actually have a course on how to self-edit. You can go to my website and it'll give you some ideas, some tips. But it really helps greatly to take distance, to take a few steps back before you go back into your manuscript and self-edit. So I would say don't send the first draft, but whether it's the 2nd or the 5th depends very, very much on how much self-discipline and how much self-criticism a writer can muster. Not everybody is able to step away from their work and see what else can be done, and that's when an editor can step in. And you don't. And again, this is the thing what I said about being an ally before. An editor will never, no matter when you send the manuscript to an editor, a good editor will always do whatever the manuscript needs, not what some preconceived idea of which step you should take now. Editors will see what's necessary, and they will advise you as to what you should be doing. So when you're looking for an editor, make sure that they're willing to talk to you, let you know how they determine what is necessary. You can ask for a sample edit if you want to, but sample edits are sometimes tough because editing 5 pages really doesn't tell you all that much about how they understand your story. It shows you whether they can edit a sentence, but it doesn't show you if they understand your story. So that's a little tricky, but it is definitely a step. But I would absolutely talk to the editor before and find out how they work, what it is they look for, and whether or not no matter what you sign up with them for, whether or not they're willing to change it if they see something else is necessary. Because you don't want somebody doing a copy edit if your manuscript doesn't need a copy edit. So.
Yeah, correct. Sticking to development editing. So I know we talked about this. You explained to me the process, and that's how I found out that I would learn a lot from you in the process, because that's one of your gifts, the people you work with.
Thank you.
I mean, you're showing them how to do it. But so a development editor, you won't go in and rewrite the manuscript for the writer. You would give the writer the notes, the guidance, and then the writer needs to go back and do the work.
Yeah, development editing is very much a communicative process, and basically the first step of development editing is that the writer and the editor communicate through the manuscript, as it were. So you would send a manuscript to me, and I would read it, and while I'm reading it, I would make notes in the margins with track changes usually. So it's all computerized, of course. And those are what I call real-time comments. So those are my comments, my reactions, my questions, my frustrations, my enjoyment as I'm reading it through, just as if I was a reader.
Okay.
And it's supposed to show you what readers, this one at least, feel, think, or don't feel and think as they read your book. Because in the end, writing a book is manipulating a reader. And because you tell your story in order to get a reaction out of your reader. And that commentary on the site will show you how I react. Now, say on page 10, I don't understand something and I ask a question. If then on page 50, I realize that, oh, there was a reason for her to not tell me this. I get it now. I will go back to page 10 and say,
I see.
I got it now, but I still had that question here, and it still made me go, why? So then the question doesn't necessarily become, did I not tell my reader what's going on? Because yes, on page 50 you did, but did you want your reader on page 10 go, or did you not? And that's something you have to figure out. If you wanted me to go, okay. I may disagree with that as your editor and say, you know what, no, I really didn't want to ask that question there. I just didn't want to as your reader. And then we talk about whether you leave this here or if you change it so that I don't have that reaction. If, on the other hand, you didn't want me to go, then you know you have to fix it.
Yeah.
So this is how it works. It's real-time comments that are then mitigated by the smarter self, after I've read, the rest of the book. And this will help you as the writer understand what kind of reactions your words on paper elicit, because that's really what it is about.
Yeah.
You are communicating with your reader, and I'm one of the readers. So that's this first step. What I do after I've read the entire manuscript is then I put it away for a day, sometimes two, and I write up an evaluation. Or it sounds worse than it is. It's a written commentary, basically. So it's where I give you the framework of those comments that I've made. So first of all, it looks at what kind of categories are most of the comments I made. Do most of them have to do with character development? If that's the case, then, well, you need to look at how you're presenting your characters. If it has to do with plot development, you and I may have to talk about, your plot twists, they don't really ring true to me. I was sitting there going, no way would this happen. Something we might have to work about, to talk about. So I categorize most of my comments like that and give you tips as to how you can either solve those problems yourself. I often make suggestions as to where I think a plot could go, where I expected the plot to go, which doesn't necessarily mean it should, but just telling you that this is where I expected the plot to go there and it didn't for whatever reason, and how you can mitigate your original vision of that plot and of that character and combine it or improve it with my reactions to it. And if possible, or if need be, I give a lot of craft tips, because much of character development really has to do with craft. It has to do with typical mantras such as show, don't tell. It has to do with don't use that many adjectives, show us how they're doing things. It has to do with, trust me, cutting is healthy, because you don't need to be verbose. So there's a lot of tips like that. Or it has to do with, the way you build scenes is not quite like that. You don't need your dialogue to start with, hi, how are you? And end it with goodbye. You can just jump in the middle. Believe me, readers are smart enough. So there are a lot of craft tips like that go into way more detail. And are tailored, of course, to what a particular client's strengths or weaknesses are. So so basically a development edit should be both. It should look at this very specific manuscript and find problems, offer solutions, and also find strengths, because that's another thing I think that's really important, and that a lot of editors forget, that it's so important to find things that are really good, because those are the things you'll keep when you're rewriting.
Yeah.
So so you have to find things that are good, things that didn't quite work yet, and ways to make those latter things work better. So it's very specific for the manuscript. But then you also, in that development phase, you step back and you talk about the craft. So how do you do this? And what were the typical things that I saw in this manuscript that have nothing to do with the story, that have far more to do with the skill level and experience of a writer. And that's where the learning comes in. You learn. Sometimes all it takes is saying, seriously, you don't need to start every dialogue with hello.
Yeah.
And seriously, I don't need to see the phone call in which you set up the date. I want to go straight to the date.
Yeah.
It's simple things like that.
Yeah.
Very typical mistakes, and they're so easy. And for people who know who in this industry, they're easy. They're not by no means easy for writers, but it's and those are what the leaps and bounds. They're really leaps and bounds. That's novice writers working with an editor. It's amazing what they can learn.
So then the writer goes back and they rewrite the manuscript, and then then what happens? If they want to show it to you again,
they can. But of course, I'm paid. I mean, I and most editors are paid, for their time.
Yeah, sure.
And so if you send it back to me, it's a new contract.
It's a new contract. Okay.
It's oftentimes though. It's very honestly, most of my clients do come back to me.
Yeah.
Because it is very, very helpful.
Yeah.
To take it a step further after that.
Yeah.
Because if you've worked with a development editor and you give that book back to them, they will go deeper and further. They will make sure that whatever you tried worked. And in addition to that, where things already work, they will do line edits. It just takes it a step further. Most of my clients come back to me for another evaluation, or it's more a mixture at that time, quite frankly. And they never want me to copy edit, because they're usually ready to, with a relatively clean manuscript, to go whatever they want to do. If you are self-publishing, you should absolutely hire somebody who goes through your manuscript again to proofread and copy edit. And it's good if it's somebody different from the development editor, because the development editor becomes too close to the manuscript as well. So it's always good to have more than one person look at your stuff, always. But it's expensive. I totally get that. But so if you're self-publishing, you might have to bite the bullet. If you're going to a publisher, put the money in development, not so much in copy editing, because it's not that hard to be done, and publishers will accept a wrong comma, but they won't accept having to rewrite the story. That's too difficult,
Thank you, Helga. That's a great tip.
Sure.
I mean, all this conversation is absolutely fantastic, and I'm sure that people will have many questions in the comments to ask you. I've been telling that we are going to talk about your story and your love for the word on paper, and how did you end up becoming an editor in the US? So.
Well, I mean, that's just kind of happenstance. But I was born in Germany, in Stuttgart, and that's where they make Mercedes and Porsche. I always say that. So I was born in Stuttgart. My parents, my entire family, all German. So there was no American influence other than post-World War II Germany. Of course, there were lots of Americans around. So but it's a very typical thing in Europe, as you well know, to learn foreign languages.
Yes.
And I started learning English and French, at 10 respectively, 12 years old, and I liked English. I always liked English. I don't know why. But I also traveled a lot in England and all that kind of stuff. My parents, were also both multilingual. So it was a very typical thing to just speak, other languages. And I just particularly liked English. I don't really know why that is. I probably had a talent to learn it very relatively easily. So all that said is all good. My love for literature kind of, is the reason why I'm in the United States. But where did that love for literature come from? Not from any one book, but it really, and I say this a lot, it came from the way my family celebrated holidays. My grandmother grew up in the Czech Republic, and what is now the Czech Republic, I should say. Back then it was Poland. But anyway, so she grew up on this farm there with like just a huge family around her, and so and it was pretty remote. And so I guess they grew up telling each other stories, and she brought this storytelling thing back home, back to Germany once I was born, years later. So Christmas, Easter, whatever, birthdays, our family, which consisted of my immediate family, so my brother, my parents, my mother's sister, her family, my mother's parents, my father's parents, and we would all sit, around this big table, and starting at lunch, because that was the big meal in Europe, and tell stories. And my grandmother, I'm telling you, she was the most fabulous storyteller ever. She claimed that all her stories were true. My father would absolutely contradict her. I mean, but it doesn't matter. The stories were all these fascinating stories. And I remember every single time, my most fond memory, literally sitting at that table, listening to her, as slowly but surely the sun was going down, outside, because we wouldn't close the shutters or anything. We just sat there from lunch through dinner listening. So stories somehow, this is just what I loved always. And I was a ferocious reader, just always. And so when it came time to decide what to study, I studied literature. When it came time to decide what kind of literature, I was like, hey, I like English. I studied English and German literature, and then I had a chance to go to a foreign country. During my studies, I went, right after college, I went to the United States for a year. And that's how my love story with the United States began. I just enjoyed it to be here. Went back, though, to finish my master's. And then after my master's in literature, I got a scholarship in New York at NYU to write my dissertation. And I went, spent that year in the United States, in New York City, loved it. And about a month or so before I was supposed to go back home, I met the guy who turned out to become my husband and the father of my children. And that's why I'm still here. So it was kind of happenstance because, I was in New York and I needed to do something. And I applied for jobs, and because I was multilingual, I got a job in a publishing house, and that was Random House, and I stayed. I was, I never looked back. Essentially, I finished my PhD, never looked back, and slowly wove my way into editing literature rather than just language text. So it was really rather than just translations and all that. So it was kind of happenstance, but I have to say, I know I was meant to be in publishing because it's just our stories have always been there. So, but it's similar to, you're just similar to you. You kind of came here, I don't know, by mistake too, and got stuck. So
it's kind of the same. And it's funny because I studied literature, language and literatures, and it was English and French in my situation in college. So, but this is such a beautiful and inspiring story when we allow ourselves to be who we are meant to be and where we are meant to be. Then things just unfold, and I think it is the same for a book.
It is the joy of looking at of listening to and looking at other people's stories. That's really what it is. And if and as a writer, if you are open to that, if you listen and if you look, and if you take it all in, and then write down what you see and what you hear, you've got a story. They're literally all around us. You know, stories are everywhere. You just have to see them. And it takes the interest, the desire to go outside yourself and to, as you said, to just let it happen, you know, to become a good writer. And it's, if you enjoy the process, it doesn't matter how many rewrites it takes. If you enjoy the process, and if you know if you have the persistence and know that this is what you want to do, you will get there. Nothing's easy. Nothing worthwhile is easy, seriously. And no profession comes without studying and learning.
Yeah.
So it's okay. So you have a bunch of, you know, unpublished books that really suck in your drawer. Okay. So the next one maybe is better. It's fine. It's fine. You know, I mean, that's how it goes. You learn, you know, as you go along. So
I love these words, Helga. So I don't want to add anything to it. I just want our viewers to keep these words in their minds and in their hearts and think about what you've just said. So I'll just thank you for a great conversation.
Oh, thank you. It was so much fun. Thank you for having me.